please the court. When we adjourned yesterday afternoon, I was in the process of developing the various means by which these conspirators acquired a totalitarian control of Germany. I wish to continue on that subject this morning, and I will first discuss the reshaping of education and the training of youth. And in accordance with Your Honor's suggestion, I offer the document book United States Exhibit D, and would call to the court's attention that this book contains translations of the documents which we rely upon with respect to this portion of the case, that these documents consist of German writings, German speeches of the defendants and other Nazi leaders, and are matters that we suggest are clearly within the purview of judicial notice of the court. And in the brief which is offered for the assistance of the court in connection with this subject, the exact portions of the documents which are desired to be brought to the attention of the tribunal are set forth either by quotation from the documents or by reference to the specific page number of the documents. Now, meanwhile, during this entire pre-war period, the nation was being prepared psychologically for war. And one of the most important steps was the reshaping of the educational system so as to educate the German youth to be amenable to their will. Hitler publicly announced this purpose in November 1933, and I am quoting from document 2455 PS. He said, when an opponent declares, those documents, sir, are arranged numerically, and the number appears on the upper right-hand corner.
You've got it, the excerpt in the trial brief, have you?
Yes, sir.
I see, yes.
He said, when an opponent declares, I will not come over to your side, and you will not get me on your side, I calmly say, your child belongs to me already. A people lives forever. What are you? You will pass on. Your descendants, however, now stand in the new camps. In a short time, they will know nothing else but this new community. He further said in May 1937, and I refer to document number 2454 PS. This new Reich will give its youth to no one, but will itself take youth and give to youth its education and its own upbringing. The first steps taken in making the German schools the tools of the Nazi educational system were two decrees in May 1934, whereby the Reich Ministry of Education was established and the control of education by local authorities were replaced by the absolute authority of the Reich in all educational matters. These decrees are set out in documents 2078 PS, 2088 PS, 2392 PS. Thereafter, the curricula and organization of the German schools and universities were modified by a series of decrees in order to make these schools effective instruments for the teaching of Nazi doctrines. The Civil Service Law of 1934, which was presented in evidence yesterday, made it possible for the Nazi conspirators to re-examine thoroughly all German teachers and to remove all harmful and unworthy elements, harmful and unworthy in the Nazi opinion. Many teachers and professors, mostly Jews, were dismissed and were replaced with state-spirited teachers. All teachers were required to belong to the National Socialist Teachers League, which organization was charged with the training of all teachers in the theories and doctrines of the NSDAP. This is set forth in document 2452 PS. Third, to acquire other territories inhabited by so-called racial Germans. And fourth, to acquire still further territories said to be needed as living space by the racial Germans so incorporated, all at the expense of neighboring and other countries. In speaking of the first aim, Hitler made an admission which applied equally to the other aims, namely that he had stated and written 1,000 times or more that he demanded the abolition of the Versailles Treaty. These aims are fully documented in the evidence offered by the prosecution on this phase of the case. And it is not my purpose at this time to recite to the court numerous declarations made by the defendants and others with respect to these aims. Moreover, these conspirators again and again publicly announced to the still unbelieving world that they proposed to accomplish these objectives by any means found opportune, including illegal means and resort to threat of force and aggressive war. The use of force was distinctly sanctioned, in fact guaranteed by official statements and directives of the conspirators, which made activism and aggressiveness a political quality obligatory for party members. As Hitler stated in Mein Kampf, what we needed and still need are not 100 or 200 reckless conspirators, but 100,000 and a second 100,000 fighters for our philosophy of life. And in 1929, Hitler stated, "We confess further that we will tear anyone to pieces who would dare hinder us in this undertaking. Our rights will be protected only when the German Reich is again supported by the point of the German dagger." Hitler in 1934, addressing the party congress at Nuremberg, stated the duties of party members in the following terms: "Only a part of the people will consist of really active fighters. It is they who were fighters of the National Socialist struggle. It is they who were fighters of the National Socialist revolution. Of them, more is demanded than of the millions among the rest of the population. For them, it is not sufficient to confess, 'I believe,' but to swear, 'I fight.'" In proof of the fact that the party was committed to the use of any means, whether or not legal or honorable, it is only necessary to remind the court that the party virtually opened its public career by staging a revolution, the Munich Putsch of 1923. Now let us consider for a moment the doctrinal techniques of the common plan or conspiracy which are alleged in the indictment. To incite others to join in the common plan or conspiracy, and as a means of securing for the Nazi conspirators the highest degree of control over the German community, they disseminated and exploited certain doctrines. The first of these was the master race doctrine, that persons of so-called German blood were a master race. This doctrine of racial supremacy was incorporated as point 4 in the party program, which provided only a member of the race can be a citizen. A member of the race can only be one who is of German blood, without consideration of confession. Consequently, no Jew can be a member of the race. They outlined this master race doctrine as a new religion, the faith of the blood, superseding in individual allegiance all other religions and institutions. The defendant Rosenberg and the defendant Streicher were particularly prominent in disseminating this doctrine. Much of the evidence to be offered in this case will illustrate the Nazi conspirators' continued espousal and exploitation of this master race doctrine. This doctrine had an eliminatory purpose. calling anything non-German or Jewish, and you have a clear right, indeed a duty, to cast it out. In fact, purges did not stop at so-called racial lines, but went far beyond. The second important doctrine, which permeates the entire conspiracy and is one of the important links in establishing the guilt of each of these defendants, is the doctrine or concept of the Führerprinzip, or leadership principle. This doctrine permeated the Nazi Party and all its formations and allied organizations, and eventually permeated the Nazi state and all institutions, and is of such importance that I would like to dwell upon it for a few moments and attempt to explain the concepts which it embraces. The Führerprinzip embodies two major political concepts. First, authoritarianism. Second, totalitarianism. Authoritarianism implies the following: all authority is concentrated at the top and is vested in one person only, the Führer. It further implies that the Führer is infallible as well as omnipotent. The party manual states, under the commandments of the National Socialists, the Führer is always right. Also, there are no legal or political limits to the authority of the Führer. Whatever authority is wielded by others is derived from the authority of the Führer. Moreover, within the sphere of jurisdiction allotted to him, each appointee of the Führer manipulates his powers in equally unrestricted fashion, subordinate only to the command of those above him. Each appointee owes unconditional obedience to the Führer and to the superior party leaders in the hierarchy. Each political leader was sworn in yearly according to the party manual, which will be introduced in evidence. The wording of the oath was as follows: I pledge eternal allegiance to Adolf Hitler. I pledge unconditional obedience to him and the Führers appointed by him. The party manual also provides that the political leader is inseparably tied to the ideology and the organization of the NSDAP. His oath only ends with his death or with his expulsion from the National Socialist community. As the defendant Hans Frank stated in one of his publications, leadership principle in the administration means always to replace decision by majority, by decision on the part of a specific person with clear jurisdiction and with sole responsibility to those above. Vast network of propaganda machinery, the Nazi conspirators had full control over the expression and dissemination of all thought, cultural activities, and dissemination of news within the Reich. Nothing was or could be published in Germany that did not have the approval, express or implied, of the party and state. The defendant Schacht, in his personal notes, explains the effect of the killing of a piece of news in a totalitarian dictatorship. As he states it, it has never become publicly known that there have been thousands of martyrs in the Hitler regime. They have all disappeared in the cells or graves of the concentration camps without ever having been heard of again. And he goes on to say, what is the use of martyrdom in the fight against terror if it has no chance of becoming known and thus serving as an example for others? I would now...
Where were you reading from then?
If Your Honor, please.
From what document were you reading when you quoted Schacht?
I'm afraid I will have
You can tell us later on.
Tell you later on, sir. I'd now like to turn your attention...
Before you pass from this subject, there is a docket on the documents which shows that certain documents are missing. What does that mean? 1708-2030.
Those documents are in the process of being reproduced and will be furnished to the court, I hope, before the close of the day, sir. But they are to be added to that book, and as yet have not been completed in their process of reproduction.
They're in German, I suppose. Have they been translated?
Yes, sir. They have been translated, and they are in the process of the translations are in the process of being reproduced.
Documents in their original form in German?
Yes, I believe they are, sir.
Very well.
I would now like to direct the court's attention to the militarization of Nazi-dominated organizations during this pre-war period. And for that purpose, I offer United States Exhibit number J, which consists of a document book with English translations, and I present to the court also a brief which accompanies this portion of the case. Throughout this war period, and while the Nazi conspirators were achieving and consolidating their totalitarian control of Germany, they did not lose sight of their main objective, aggressive war. Accordingly, they placed a considerable number of their dominated organizations on a progressively militarized footing, with a view to the rapid transformation of these organizations, whenever necessary, as instruments of war. These organizations were the SS, the SA, the Hitlerjugend, the NSKK, or National Socialist Motor Corps, the NSFK, which is the National Socialist Aviation Corps, the RAD, which is the Reich Labor Service, and the OT, which is the TOT organization. The manner in which the militarization was accomplished is detailed in part in the documents which have been presented to the court, and will be detailed further when the particular organizations are taken up and discussed and their criminality established at subsequent stages in the case. At this time, I would like to call your court's attention to a chart. And while the chart is physically being placed on the board, I would offer United States Exhibit number 23, I beg your pardon. It's United States Exhibit number 22, which is document 2833PS, and is a reproduction of page 15 of the book entitled History of the Nazi Party. You will note that on the left lower corner of the chart placed on the board, there are some papers attached. The top paper is an affidavit which reads as follows: I certify that the above enlargement is a true and correct copy prepared under my direct supervision of document number 2833PS, page 15 of the book entitled History of the Party. And you will note that underneath is a second paper, and this affidavit states it is a correct photographic copy of which appears in the left-hand corner of the panel. This affidavit is signed by David Zabaldowski, sworn to and subscribed the 23rd day of November 1945 at Nuremberg, Germany, before James H. Johnson, First Lieutenant, Office of the U.S. Chief of Counsel. This chart visualizes as vividly as possible just how this militarization took place in Germany. The chart is entitled the organic incorporation of German nationals into the National Socialist system and the way to political leadership. Starting at the bottom of the chart, you see the young folk between the ages of 10 and 14. The arrows point both right and left. The arrow to the right is the Adolf Hitler School for youth between the ages of 12 and 18. Both from the school and from the young folk, they proceed to the Hitler Jugend. At 18 years of age, they graduate from the Hitler Jugend into the various party formations, the SA, the SS, the NSKK, the NSFK. The age of 20, they continue from these party formations into the labor front. And from the labor front, after they have served their period of time there, back again to the party formations of the SA, the SS, NSKK, and SFK, until they reach the age of 21. Then they proceed into the Army, serve in the Army from the ages of 21 to 23, and then back again into the party formations of SA, SS, etc. And then from that group, the select move up to be political leaders of the Nazi Party. And from that group are selected the cream of the crop who go to the Nazi Party special schools. And from these schools, as is represented on the top of the chart, graduate the political Führer of the people. I would emphasize again to the court that this chart is not anything that was prepared by counsel in this case. It was prepared by the Nazi Party people, and it comes from their own history. Thus, by the end of the pre-war period, the Nazi conspirators had achieved one of the first major steps in their grand conspiracy. All phases of German life were dominated by Nazi doctrine and practice, and mobilized for the accomplishment of their militant aims. To the extent to which this was accomplished can be no better expressed than the words of Hitler when he spoke to the Reichstag on 20 February 1938. I refer to document 2715 PS. He said, "Only now have we succeeded in setting before us the great tasks and in possessing the material things which are the prerequisites for the realization of great creative plans in all fields of our national existence." Thus, National Socialism has made up with a few years for what centuries before it had omitted. National Socialism has given the German people that leadership which as party not only mobilizes the nation, but also organizes it, so that on the basis of the natural principle of selection, the continuance of a stable political leadership is safeguarded forever. National Socialism possesses Germany entirely and completely since the day when, 5 years ago, I left the house in Wilhelmsplatz as Reich Chancellor. There is no institution in this state which is not National Socialist. Above all, however, the National Socialist Party in these 5 years not only has made the nation National Socialist, but also has given itself the perfect organizational structure which guarantees its permanence for all future. The greatest guarantee of the National Socialist Revolution lies in the complete domination of the Reich and all its institutions and organizations, internally and externally, by the National Socialist Party. Its protection against the world abroad, however, lies in its new National Socialist armed forces. In this Reich, anybody who has a responsible position is a National Socialist. Every institution of this Reich is under the orders of the supreme political leadership. The party leads the Reich politically, the armed forces defend it militarily. There is nobody in any responsible position in this state who doubts that I am the authorized leader of the Reich. Thus spoke Adolf Hitler at the end of this period on the 20th of February, 1938.